So this is an interview with Graham, Henrietta Geshen, and we're here at Christmas 2008, and we finally have the chance to put together the beginnings of what we hope will be some long videos of talking about Graham's life and all her important and incredible memories that we hope to share for many, many generations. So without further ado, I'm going to start asking questions, and this should be mostly a conversation. So you just talk about what you want to talk about and important stories so that your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren will always have something to remember you by. So I thought we'd start with a little Christmas question, since it is quite Christmas. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Christmas in your family when you were a child, and some of the presents that you received and things like that.
Well, as you know, my grandfather, John C. Winters, was born in Germany in about 1865. He came to this country when he was 3 years old with his parents, and they settled in a little town called Farnham. And later on, they bought the farm, the house and the farm where I was brought up. And being German, they always had the German Christmas Eve dinner. And I had several cousins who joined us. And my uncle, Fred, who was my mother's older brother, would walk into the woods and find a pine tree or a hemlock tree that he thought was suitable, and he would cut it down and bring it to our sun porch and install it in the back of the corner of the sun porch. And I think we had a lot of old-fashioned, like, handmade decorations, nothing fancy. And of course we had aluminum icicles, which you had to hang on the branches, and it wasn't anything too elaborate, but anyway, we were told we can't go up to that sun porch until Santa had a chance to get there. So in the meantime, my aunt, my mother, prepared a Christmas Eve sort of a cold dinner, and with maybe cold meats and cheeses. And then all of a sudden, it was time for Santa to come, and they opened the door, and I think Aunt May used to do something too. We couldn't peek through the window curtains.
So this was Christmas Eve, though.
Christmas Eve, yeah. So then that was the climactic part, when we got our presents from our cousins, and Santa had already come. And then on Christmas morning, it was just play with the toys you got the night before. But that was Christmas, because when I was born, we lived in another house, and my father died.
Where was this?
What?
Where?
That was on the corner of a road called the Hard Pan Road, which, because it was not paved.
But this was up in New York, right?
Yeah, in Brant, New York. And we lived, my mother and father lived in that house, and then my father died very young, so my mother couldn't make it alone, and she was invited to move in with my grandfather. So that was where I brought up. Grandpa's house was very, very big and comfortable, and of course he was lonely. He was a widower, and he had his oldest daughter, who was an old maid, a spinster. She never married, and she was his housekeeper. So my mother, who was very young to be a widow, she was 33, and
this was your grandfather's daughter, Super Graham, right? So okay.
Super Graham was a very, very young widow and couldn't make it on her own, so we moved into Grandpa's house. So I was 7, she was 33, and I guess my grandfather was probably late 60s. Aunt May was probably in her 50s. But I was a young kid in a house full of adults. So we didn't have a lot of noisy play or anything like that. It was sort of a lonely childhood. But Christmas was always nice because my cousins came. And one was Cousin Frederick. He was Uncle Fred's son. And then there was Roger, Betty, and Carlton, who were Uncle Charlie's children. and they all lived either next door or the house down the street, because this was almost a winter's compound, our big farmhouse that I lived in. And then on the next property was a hired man's house, and then next to that was Uncle Fred's house, and across the street was Uncle Charlie's house, and there was still another hired man's house, which was a little, not a cabin, it was comfortable enough, but we always had a hired man who was hired to drive the horses, take care of the horses, and that meant plow the land, prepare it for the crops. So this was a lot of buildings and a lot of action at Grandpa's farm. You never saw it, but my 4 kids, we used to go up there in the summer and visit.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I saw it when Super Graham died, I think, and we went up to the house up there and cleaned up.
But also when your father took the sabbatical and had you kids in the station wagon.
That's right.
Did you not stop then?
We stopped up there and saw Carlton and Jean and things like that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your dad, what you remember, and maybe how he died, and what it was like on the farm, and Super Graham.
Not too little. My father was the next to the youngest. His father was Jacob Burgott, married to Elida Tucker, who died in childbirth. They had a daughter, first of all, Carolyn, then they had a son, Glenn, then they had my father, Harry, his younger sister, Adele, and when Elida had her last child, she died in childbirth. So that baby had no mother to nurse her or to take care of her, so they adopted her. They found somebody that would adopt her pretty soon. I don't think she was too old when they found a family that was childless. And so that sister was not too well known to them, because she was immediately moved to Ohio. But anyway, then my grandfather, Jacob, was helpless, probably, being faced with this house full of kids so he did marry again, and he married a spinster who was not too fond of children, or rather cold, and I don't know, I think she had been a teacher. What women could not be anything professional, so I think she was a teacher. But anyway, she was the stepmother, the wicked stepmother, and they pretty much didn't like her, except my father was nice to her because he was a good man and a very gentle, kind man, and I think of him as having quite a sense of humor and nice to be around, happy-go-lucky, sort of. And unfortunately, he was drafted into the Army, and he fought in World War I, and it ruined his health.
Your father, not your
My
family.
father,
Okay.
yeah. Jacob Burgott, I don't know, I never saw him. I don't know the year when he died, but they were all dispersed pretty much. And the mother, Alice, the stepmother's name was Alice, and she lived for a long time, and my mother and I used to go see her. She lived in the Burgott house, and
Was the Burgott house very close to the Winters house?
No, it was in a different town entirely,
Okay.
different county. But anyway, Alice Burgott lived in the